Aloha, everybody. Welcome, Stephen Bright.
Hi.
So it looks like we already got a few people in the chat here. We got Wandering Mountain Bardic Path. Sorry, I always stumble over that one for some reason. That's Jamie. Then we got Scott, Scorpion Moon Tarot, our lovely Ishi, Kumar Artist. Let's see. Elemental Cartomancy, our own Chris Kelly. He's in Scotland. Let's see, and Regina Tarot is here. Welcome everybody and anyone who I haven't seen because I'm just looking at StreamYard at the moment. This is the amazing Stephen Bright, creator of Spirit Within Tarot. And we are just going to have a little chit chat about the deck, about Tarot, and what's in the future for Mr. Bright. So, do you have anything you want to say before we get started with the cards?
No, not really. You go ahead.
Okay. So I like pulling 10 cards out that just kind of like grab me when I'm going through the deck, just to like have a chat about it. And it seems appropriate that we start with the World card here.
Yeah.
So this is one of the few male worlds I've seen out there in the Tarot community. So is this someone specific or?
It is. It's a lot of the cards within the deck. I enlisted the help of people that I knew, and this World card is based on an internet friend of mine called Don Hood, who is I think he's based in New York, and he's a male model. And we've been speaking for a while, and I've used him actually in the 2 decks that I've created, and he's going to be in a forthcoming deck as well. He's become almost kind of like a feature of my decks now. That there's always a Don in my deck. So it's actually, you know, the picture is of one of the photo shoots he did. I think it was an underwear shoot, and it just kind of had that look, you know, of the World card. So yeah, he's also, I don't know if people realize, he's in the back design as well of the cards in a mandala as well. It's all made up of little Dons all the way around. Yeah. But all of the cards, you know, they all, a lot of them have some kind of either connection to my environment and the people that I know, or some kind of experience in my background as well. But not too obviously that it jars with anybody else's, hopefully.
Right. And what inspired the idea of the silhouettes?
What happened initially, I never intended for Spirit Within to be published. It was something that I did when I was blogging, and I had the idea that I wanted to teach more on my blogs. And because of problems with copyright, I knew that I couldn't use decks like the Rider-Waite-Smith, you know, 100% of the time. So a friend said to me, you know, why don't you just create one of your own? And I had this one image that I'd created, which is of the 5 cups, sitting on my Mac for about a year and a half or something, not doing anything. And I found it, and that's kind of where it all started. And once the cards were on the blog, people started saying to me, you know, is this deck available to buy? And I was like, well, no, not really. And I thought about self-publishing, and then I contacted a few different publishers, and then Schiffer decided to take it up and publish it. So that's kind of how it all began in the first place. But, you know, silhouettes are something that, you know, they're very universal. And one of the great things that we've found since this is that, you know, it kind of takes away, in some places, gender, it takes away race, color, age to some extent, you know.
Right.
And that means it becomes a mirror to so many different people. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people do enjoy using that deck, because you can see yourself in it.
I just noticed a comment here by Jamie saying that she loves the backs on this deck. The backs
thank
are
you.
spectacular.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the next one I pulled is the Hierophant, which
it has a
this is,
story too.
yeah. I feel a story from this. Like, I don't know. I see this teacher figure who also has a very feminine silhouette, and it's interesting because usually the Hierophant is not female, and I don't know. I really get drawn into this. Like, I want to sit down and hear the story. Right? So
Yeah. You know, when I created the cards, some of the cards you will look at and you'll see that they're very Rider-Waite based. You know, like the World to some extent, and cards like the Wheel of Fortune. And then there are some cards that I had to really sit with, and the Hierophant was one of the last cards that I designed because I was kind of thinking, you know, how should the Hierophant look to me? Who is my Hierophant? You know, and I didn't really have some kind of religious person in mind. So I was kind of thinking, you know, who's brought insight into my life? Who have I sought some kind of insight from? And for a very long time, I used to frequent the Kabbalah Center in London, and I learned so much. It was, you know, just going there and reading the texts from the Kabbalah Center there was like a line in the sand. It was like, you know, a difference between my old life and the life that I changed into. So it was very important for me. So I thought about that, and I thought, you know, Karen Berg, who was up until recently because she passed away not long ago, was the head of the Kabbalah Center. And I enjoyed watching her videos and reading her books. And I thought, you know, it would be great to have Karen as my Hierophant. And in her own history, when she became involved in the Kabbalah Center through marriage, back in, I think it was maybe the 60s or 70s, she was not allowed to take part in a lot of the lessons because you had to be over the age of 40 and you had to be male. And the Kabbalah Center, when her and her husband Philip became the heads of that, they changed all of that and they made it accessible to everybody. So in that picture, we have the boy and we have the girl who are both being taught equally.
right.
And in the back, you have the LA Kabbalah Center, which, you know, some people might look at that and think it's a church, and that's great. You know, I kind of did it so that it was, you know, anybody could approach it with their own feelings and their own experience, but that is the story from where it came.
I took it as a place of learning.
Yeah. And that's why the silhouette is good, because, you know, you can kind of shape these images into things that make sense for you, you know.
Right. Well, and knowing the story, this card now has even deeper meaning. So it's one of the reasons I love doing these interviews, because I get to see the deck from the creator's point of view, which is.
I mean, initially, I never really
priceless.
spoke to people about it because I didn't want to influence other people's view of the cards. You know, I wanted people to kind of formulate their own relationships and find their own characters. But I mean, it is nice to sometimes to just reveal some of those things as well, and some of the people that are in them.
So that brings us to my next card, Strength.
Yeah.
Which for me, I think the reason why this jumped out at me out of 78 cards is just this idea of facing a lion on a cliff face is just like brings it to a whole other level that you don't really see in a lot of strength cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can actually feel like the strength needed to get through the situation.
You know, that's one of my favorite cards, and there are a few cards in the deck like the Hanged Man and Strength and the Hermit, which are seen from far away, and I find them to be quite impactful because it's almost like you know, you're out walking through this landscape, and then just in the distance you see somebody just hanging there. You know, how do you respond to that? And in that card, you know, you're looking at this kind of this battle between this lion, this person, and you can see that the person who is crouched down, I mean, it could be you, but you know, whoever is up there they either confront the lion or they fall back over the rock, you know. So it's like, what
Right.
are you going to do? And you know, it's there's this kind of spectator feel to it that,
Right.
you know, I never set out to do this intentionally with some of the cards, but they kind of they kind of took shape, and they were kind of revealed themselves to me as I was creating them. So, you know, they weren't all planned out specifically.
I think that's the best kind of art, truthfully, is the like organic,
Mm.
natural expression. Right. I think that's the
Yeah, it's
most
a wonderful surprise sometimes, you know,
right.
like I was seeing them for the first time too.
So the next one I have, I pulled the Four of Swords just because I don't know. After a summer of playing with my kid who's been dealing with distance learning for the last year and a half, and today's his first day at school, it's like I feel myself wanting to do this. I think that's why I ended up pulling this one. But yeah, I love this that he's on a couch instead of in a tomb.
Hmm.
So,
It's relatable, isn't it? You know,
mhm,
and you can look at that in so many different ways. You know, I mean, when I see it, I see somebody who's taking a brief rest, you know, and the sword is underneath, the sword's hanging up
mhm,
on the wall. You know, they're there for use, but, you know, right now you're kind of having that break, you're having that little bit of
right.
time out. And you could also kind of look at it, you know, especially if it fell into a future position and think, well, you know, this could even be a card of illness or forced relaxation
Right.
if you don't, you know, adhere to the lessons that are being presented to you in the present. So it does kind of change around in readings. It could even be laziness as well, you know, in some readings.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting you say that because that forced rest idea is very strong in Chinese medicine. I'm an acupuncturist. And they say that if you are too young, like always going, 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 your body's going to rebel and
Hmm.
force you into a state of rest by either like having a heart attack or a stroke or something that causes you to have to just lay there and do nothing.
Yeah.
So that just you just triggered that when you said that forced rest. So I could see that. But I
Yeah.
also see it as like, oh God, I have a lot to do today. I'm going to take that 15-minute power nap so I can just power through.
Absolutely. Why not? Why not? Yeah.
Right?
And yeah, and the world is still going on outside the window. You know, it's
Right.
about just kind of taking that step out. Everything's kind of still going to go on, whether you do or
Mhm.
you don't. Yeah.
With that crescent moon. I love that crescent moon. Let's see. The next one I have, the devil.
Yeah.
It's
This
just so
one, you know,
interesting. Just, go ahead.
a lot of people talked about it when this deck was coming out. A friend of mine, Andrea Aste, who's also a deck creator,
Mhm.
um, he asked if he could use the pictures for presentation for the Tarot Association of the British Isles. And this is one of the cards that he took. And apparently there was so much conversation going on in the room about, you know, oh my God, what is going on in that card? You know, you've got this devil and you've got this baby, and you know, loads of people had ideas about what that could mean. But
Right.
when I created it, the idea was how, you know, we can all be a little bit like babies sometimes, you know, and we have these needs.
Mhm.
And you know, and the baby there is kind of reaching out because it wants everything. And the devil, you know,
Right.
you could look at the devil as somebody who is able to take advantage of that, or you know, he could be just a symbol of those things that we want a lot of. You know, babies just want to consume everything, don't they? And feel everything. And he could be a symbol for those things in our life that we have that relationship with. You know, that we want all of that chocolate cake, or we want all of those cigarettes, or all of that alcohol, or you know, whatever
Right.
the devil symbolizes for you. You know.
Those things that soothe our inner child, basically,
Yeah,
whether
and
they're
and
good
I
for
found
us
it
or not.
important. Absolutely. I
Hmm.
found it important as well to make him look, I think he's wearing trainers, and he just looks like, apart from the horns, he looks just like a normal guy.
Right.
And I didn't want it to be the devil to be something that was really otherworldly. I wanted it to kind of be rested in our, real lives.
Mm-hmm.
The normal stuff sometimes is the stuff which can be harmful if we don't moderate.
Well, and I love that you still have their shadows in there too.
Yeah. The deck actually was initially called the Spirit Within the Shadows Tarot. And then that got changed somewhere along the line when I was working with Schiffer.
Just to Spirit Within.
Mm-hmm. It's better like that. I prefer it, Spirit Within.
So the next one, I realize I have 3 kind of harder ones to deal with here, but I don't know. That's just kind of how they came out. And this is the most dynamic 10 of Swords I've ever seen. Like, he's ready
does it work for you?
Well, for me, I see someone who's been pushed down by his own thoughts, and he's ready to, flex those muscles to shoot those swords back out and get on with it.
Yeah.
So
I think, in a sense, you could look at it as one step after the traditional 10 of Swords. I began with the traditional 10 of Swords. I had somebody laying down, and it didn't really do anything for me. So I went back and redid that one because, you can see that, pain has been inflicted in some sort of way, but now he's rising up, and the swords have not necessarily left him. That they're still there, they're still impacted him, but he's not allowing it to defeat him completely. So
right.
there is like a next step, I guess, with this card. And sometimes we see that as the sunset in the traditional Rider-Waite version, and we still have that, but you also see that there is some power in that,
Right.
in that figure as well. In the way that sometimes we can go through some really difficult stuff in our life, but we learn from it, we change, we evolve. So it does have even though it looks dark, it still has a little bit of a positive message as well.
Definitely.
And that's another online friend as well who modeled for that card. So
very cool. Yeah, it definitely gives the impression of like, even though the swords are there, I'm still gonna do what needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think it's nice that that people can find something of a positive nature in all of the cards. However dark they might appear to be when you first look at them.
Deanne Blue Crescent Turo says this 10 of Swords always makes me think of Indigenous American tribal dance. I love it.
I've never thought of that.
I can see that though. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
so did I. That's one of the things some people have said to me before. I love how you did this with that card, and I think I did because people see things in them that I never intended, and I love that.
Hello, everyone who's come in. I've been kind of neglecting chat. Sorry about that.
But I will remember the tribal dance now. Every time I use it and get that card, I will remember that. I like that.
I like that a lot too. Yes, heart. So the next one I pulled, we have Death. And I love that it's this very feminine silhouette with the wings, but the scythe as well. It's not the skeletal death. Vertigo Comics came out with a whole series with Dream and Death and Destiny and all that, those as like personified people. And this reminds me of the death from that universe. So the endless, as Neil Gaiman calls them.
There's another friend of mine who modeled for this card. And I wanted the death card to have a beauty to it, because I think death can get a little bit of a bad rap, and I think that you
Mhm.
know she's only doing her job at the end of the day, and she comes
Right.
along sometimes in readings to help us, not to completely unsettle us. There are a lot of
Mhm.
things in life that we need no need to end, and sometimes we need to take control of that and end them, but we don't. And she kind of comes along, she's kind of standing there and she's kind of saying, um, do you need to call time on this?
Mhm.
She I don't think we should fear her as much as some people do, and that's kind
Well,
of why she has that beautiful angel feel to her.
right. Right. It's the angel of death, right? People
Yeah,
forget the angel part, they just focus on the death part. So this
yeah.
is a good reminder that death is an angel. So,
And there's so many, I mean, as a reader, and loads of people know that there's so many times in life when something ending is a positive thing.
right.
You know, there always is. And sometimes even when there are things that appear negative to begin with, when they're ending, we can sometimes look forward, in months or years time, and kind of think, oh, it was inevitable that was going to happen, or this wouldn't have happened if that hadn't have stopped. When we end relationships, and we're
Mhm.
distraught about it, and 5 years down the track, we're in a far better, healthier relationship than we were in before, and we can see that if that hadn't have finished, we wouldn't be there. So I think sometimes you kind of have to just kind of sit back with that death card, and just kind of think, what are you here to tell me? Where are you taking me?
Well, and it brings up that whole idea that sometimes the biggest disappointments are our biggest blessings in disguise. Because if that disappointment
Yeah,
didn't happen, then we wouldn't have been steered over to this other thing that ended up being the best thing to happen to us. So,
absolutely. Yeah, totally.
you know, speaking of movement, the next card is the Chariot, which I love that you put on a skateboard. I was going to ask you this skyline in the background. It's like I can almost place it, but I can't quite.
Oh, I kind of drew loads of different buildings and
Mhm.
landscapes, and kind of merged a lot of them together. So as you kind of look through, you'll find things all kind of um, matched together. So it's not actually an actual skyline.
Right.
Um, the
But it's so
chariot
funny that
himself.
it almost looks like someplace I know. It's just
Oh, right.
like,
Well, that's great.
right.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Once again, I think it's great when people look at the characters, they look at the landscapes, and they kind of think, oh, I know that place, or that feels familiar to me, even if it doesn't feel familiar from maybe this lifetime. I've got
Mhm.
some kind of connection to it, and then when you go back into that card, you feel at home there, or
Right.
you see sometimes something different. Um, I
It's like I
one of the
feel like
cards.
I've been there somewhere at some point.
Yeah, well, and maybe you'll go there again. The magician card, I've looked at since I created it, and I saw my father as a young man in it, and it was not something, once again, that was ever intended. But it
Mhm.
because it's a silhouette, sometimes it will reflect things back to you at different times in your life. What you see in a certain court card one year, you might not see the same in 5 years' time, because you have a whole host of different people around you. So it can kind of pull up people maybe that can come into your life that you're unaware of. The Chariot, getting back to that one, I know there were some people saying, "Oh, it's a bit of a modern take of the Chariot," but a few of the cards, I kind of felt, to really get the essence of the meaning, I had to bring it up to date. And
Right.
here is the idea is, that for him to, or her to, move forward, you've got to really kind of be in control of that skateboard, so it doesn't either knock the rocks on that side or on that side. You've got to be really focused and determined, and know where you're going. So the skateboard kind of
And
felt
balanced.
right to me. Absolutely balanced. Yes,
Mhm.
I like him, and I like the colors in that one too.
I like this Chariot personally.
Yeah,
I like your deck. Actually,
thank you.
I edged it.
Great. I like looking at edge decks. It's not something I've done myself, but whenever people put them up, some people say, "Oh God, I hope you don't mind," and it's like, no, please do what you want with it. You know, it's your deck, and it's nice to
Mhm.
see. I've seen them in all different kinds of colors.
Yeah. Well,
I just haven't got around to it.
I originally did purple, but it was this weird purple that kind of clashed with the one on the
Okay,
back, and so I ended up doing metallic colors. So each suit has
it
its
looks
own
nice.
metallic on top of purple, so the
Yeah,
purple still kind of bleeds through. So I don't know. I liked how it turned out.
I've
And I
seen
usually
some
only edge
in very
decks that
bright
I know I'm
colors.
never getting rid of. So
Good, good. So that's nice to hear.
um, so next one I have here is the sun, which this is one of my favorite sun cards. I don't know why, but it's just like this meditation,
Mm.
sunrise at Stonehenge kind of thing. It's just like I've always wanted to do this.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's not so much of a story to that one, really. I just wanted to kind of give an idea of how I felt about the sun. You know, I find the sun generally to be very uplifting. You know, I love those days when you pull out the blinds in your room and the sun comes through. It's very healing. It's very uplifting, and that's kind of that's kind of what that was all about. You know, and you've got the idea of the sun lighting up Stonehenge there as well. And often I think about the sun as being a kind of clarity, and you know, it shows up everything for what it is.
Right.
So that one, there's a few cards, you know, and it's just I wanted to kind of get that feeling over in them rather than placing those of the symbolism, perhaps.
Hmm. Definitely one of my favorite sun cards. And then this is the last card I pulled. It's probably my favorite card in the deck, and probably my favorite temperance of all times.
I was
So
wondering if you was going to show that one.
yeah,
That is a
this
perfect
is
example of bringing it right up to date. And I think once people realized why I'd done it and the way that I'd done it, they started to like it more. Because I think, you know, sometimes obviously it's not difficult to understand where more historical decks are coming from. I think sometimes you need to be able to understand it in the modern world. And
mhm,
that idea of the DJ taking two very different things, you know, we've got the blue record on one side and we have the orange record on the other side,
right,
and fusing them together to make an entirely different tune. You know, and you can kind of see on both sides how it's all kind of mixing together. I thought was a really nice way of explaining it in our current times. You know, that whole new
definitely.
tune that can be made from two. Um,
Yeah.
it's another one. You know, I spent time thinking about, you know, how could I do this, and I was thinking about, you know, it's a little bit like running a bath, isn't it? And you kind of have to get the right temperature. You got some of the hot water and some of the cold water to get the balance right. But this, I like the idea that, you know, this was creating something entirely different, you know, and how DJs can make a whole new song sometimes, you know, out of just bits and
Mhm.
pieces of different stuff. So I'm glad that you like that one.
Well, so I've always had friends that are DJs, like for the last 20 years or so. And so I really appreciate this because I've been behind the decks watching them mix the music and seeing like how much skill it takes. And there was
Mm,
this one guy I met. He was just, I was in college, so it was like in the dorms, and he was practicing and he told me to come listen. And what he did was he didn't just like take a song and merge it into the next song. He literally took like a minute here, 2 minutes there, 30 seconds there of different records and wove it all together into his own music, which was mind-blowing, sitting there listening to him do that. So this brought that back for me, like that
It's kind
idea
of like, have you seen on YouTube, they do those English, I think they're called like mashups, and they take two completely different records and they just fuse them together and you've got this whole new experience. It kind of reminded me of that. And also the other nice thing about it is because you've got the two halves of the card, you could always, you know, put a card on either side of it and it kind of look at those two things, you know, how do these two cards fuse together?
Right.
What do you get from those two cards being pulled together?
And we have our lovely Tangi Roman Viscotti is saying that she's loving this card.
Thank you.
Because technically I'm an alien DJ. She's got a great channel. Lots of fun music videos. So that was the cards I pulled. I do have a few more questions for you. One question I do have is, which card was the hardest one for you to actually produce?
I think, you know, in terms of the visuals, the tower was quite difficult because that was one example of where just doing a very traditional tower with a lightning striking. Sometimes you would do things with cards, or you would kind of draw things out which you thought were going to look great, and then you would put them in the card and they would look really static. So what ended up with the tower is that I kind of ended up skewing everything. So the tower is kind of going to one side and the landscape's going to another, and you've got people flying all over the place, because I felt you really needed to be able to see that chaotic movement. Whereas if the tower had just been in the center of the card and we had the lightning flash, I don't think it would have been as successful. So there were some cards which really took some playing about with. Yeah, so you kind of, the whole perspectives are kind of a little bit skewed, so you can kind of get that idea of the chaos,
Right.
and also to, you know, to bring that you've got the people falling kind of towards you as well. So you're viewing them from
whereas
almost
the tower
underneath.
becomes the background and it's more about the silhouette.
Yeah. But a lot of times it's really weird when you know you ask people to do positions for the cards, and people they do these really great positions, and in the photographs they look fantastic, but then when you draw them out, you realize that kind of like if a hand isn't in a kind of certain position, it makes them look like they've got a funny shaped body, or that they haven't got an arm at all, or if they're not in a particular good profile, then, you know, their heads look like blobs, and then you have to kind of go back to something and say, we need to redo this. So every time I did this, and the same with the Rainbow Kipper as well, I had to send out very, if I didn't take the photographs myself, I had to send out very specific requirements from people. And you know, and that sometimes that would be like sending out about 5 or 6 different photographs of different positions. Like, you know, I want everything to be face on. I don't want anything from an angle. You kind of don't have your arms like this, and you know, all of these kind of things. You know, make sure that your feet are not chopped off. So yeah, sometimes, you know, you would have like I'd have an idea that I thought would be really good, and then I would do it and it would just look kind of rubbish, so I'd have to go back to the drawing board again, and you can never really plan for that, unfortunately.
Joseph, IT guy, asks, if you did a new deck in the future, would you stay with the silhouette motif?
I'm working on a new deck at the moment, which is also for Schiffer, and it's a fortune telling deck, and I'm not using silhouettes. So you can actually see some of them. They're on my Instagram, but they are more kind of like illustrative stamps. You know, I wanted to have something that looked kind of a little bit antique, even though some of the characters are quite modern. So Yeah, the reason I did the silhouettes, as I explained earlier, was just because that I had that initial picture that I continued to work with and expand.
Right.
When it came to doing the rainbow kipper, I met up with Tony Pule when I was in Birmingham at a conference, and because the kipper cards are simplistic, the silhouette seemed to be just like the perfect way
Right.
of expressing those cards. So I could have done it very, very differently, but I carried on with that. If you can see, I carried on with that way of doing things,
Right.
just because it made sense for the subject. Even though in these cards the images are not flat, I used lots of different textured paper in
Mm-hmm.
different colors rather than flat color. So and lots
Right.
of other layers of old handwriting and that kind of stuff. So they're a little bit of a move on, I guess, from Spirit Within. But for the moment, I think I'm done with silhouettes.
Naomi, speaking of, Naomi Hewitt says, Stephen, you've done a kipper that really complements this deck. Would you consider doing a Lenormand?
Yeah, maybe one day. I love Lenormand cards. Maybe for the future. I definitely would like to write more about Lenormand. I've done a very brief bit of Lenormand in a book that's coming out at the end of this year, which is like an overview of all different kinds of divination. I wrote about it there, but because it's an overview, it's not particularly extensive. But as we move on, maybe sometime that would be nice, and maybe that's another thing that would work very well in silhouettes, because you've got that simplicity, which I think you need in a Lenormand deck. You don't want it to be too crowded or too busy.
Right.
So yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Cousin Turo says, I'm flipping through Rainbow Kipper deck and book right now.
I
Love
hope
it.
you're enjoying it.
Regina Turo says, I love the silhouettes and Spirit Within so much.
Thank you.
And Mikale Sunflower just ordered the Rainbow Kipper, and she says it'll be her first Kipper deck.
Thank you. The Rainbow Kipper, we wanted it to be simplistic, not just in the images, but we also wanted the text to be really clear. And I think that's one of the things we're really proud of, is the fact that it is. Tony wrote the text, and I had a little bit of input when we were going through like editing and making sure that everything was just right.
Right.
We wanted it to be something that people could pick up and start to read without loads of study. But the book itself is a great resource for a beginner Kipper reader, and there's not loads of information out there. You get a very substantial book that goes into all of the
Right.
cards and the placements and how to read with it. So hopefully it'll be lasting Kipper for people.
I actually don't have any Kipper decks yet, but I think I might need to get that one. Just because I'm not sure I'm ready for Kipper yet, because I'm just taking a Lenormand class now, even though I've been doing Tarot for like 32 years. I'm only just getting into Lenormand because it was so hard to make the transition from Tarot to Lenormand. And I finally just signed up for a class, and now it's finally clicking. But
It's
I
nice when it
remember,
clicks.
right? I remember seeing a post that you had put up on, I believe, Facebook, about how when you're thinking of new decks, you just get a deck of blank cards and just write the name on the deck or on the card. Yeah. So how many decks do you have that you've done this with that are like have never been made, but you're thinking of having them made?
There are quite a few in the cupboard, because sometimes, if I wanted a new deck, I would make it, and sometimes I would do the designs myself, or sometimes I would find things elsewhere, and I would kind of put something together, and I would print it out on my home computer, laminate it, and by the end of the day, I had something new to work with. So there's a fair few of those in boxes around. And sometimes they're decks that I've used a lot more than I've used those that I've bought. The deck that I'm creating at the moment is a playing card deck. So, you know, I bought a couple of playing card decks, and I have like my titles on them, and they're sort of scribbling out on them. And because I think, you know, you need to really, before you create something, it's always good to see if it works. You know, really test it out, because there's times when you look at cards and think, oh, you know, maybe that's not the best title for that. Maybe I need to adjust that. And sometimes you can only see that within readings. So I like my decks to really work. I recently I wrote the book for Anne Stokes' Gothic Oracle, which is not out yet. But I was sent, I don't remember how many, about 45 of her images of her paintings. So I ended up printing them all out and sticking them all onto little cards with titles. And that's where I started, you know, moving them around, looking at them, you know, seeing how they felt before I would write a piece for each one of the cards. So I always recommend, you know, if you're gonna make a deck, it's good to have like a dummy deck to begin with, just to see if it works. Because I think we've all had those decks in times where they don't work so well, and it's
it's trial and error, right?
Isn't it? Yeah.
And I have to admit that really the thing that helped my Lenormand knowledge finally click into place was getting a playing deck and just writing the names of the cards on it with like keywords underneath.
Yeah.
And that was my deck for a while. Taking the image out and just having the word, and that really helped me just understand that language, basically.
And the great thing about that as well is if people want to learn Normand, you know, or at least to give it a try, that is something you can do, and you can spend very, very small amounts on playing cards. And most people have things like that laying around anyway, or even just, you know, 36 pieces of cardstock, and you're good to go. You know, a few internet resources and your own homemade deck, and you know, you can get started.
Right. They actually sell blank tarot cards, I believe. So
They do. Yes.
There you go. There's the start of your anybody's new deck right there. So
but these days as well, you know, if you have the images, you can have like print on demand printers, you know, where you just you know, upload the images, and then you can print off 1 copy, 2 copies. The price is down the more that you order, but you know, it's kind of, you know, it's about the same sort of price if you order 2 as if you were going to buy a deck from Amazon. So, but you know, it's a deck that's tailored to your needs, you know, your images, your titles, how you want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, make playing cards, the Game Crafter, Drive Through Cards, what other ones? Printer Studio.
Yeah, so Printer Studio I've used.
Yeah. Well, and I'm guessing there's ones that are closer to each individual for, like, you know, for me, make playing cards might be a better deal than Printer Studio, or so shopping around is always a good idea.
I created Spirit Within actually that way to begin with. I wanted to see how it was going to look before it got accepted by Schiffer. So I did somewhere. I do have that deck, but the images changed somewhat in between those two different decks. So, you know, if I do ever look at it, it's like, oh my god, I don't remember that looking like that, or some of the cards had changed.
Right.
You know.
And Deanne says, yes, blank tarot cards exist. I'm going to make a deck using stickers.
Great. Yeah.
I love
That's the wonderful thing, you know. You can do whatever you want, and there's no rules. You can make decks however you fancy, you know, and with a variety of different resources as well. I've got another book coming out actually at the end of this year, which is called The Oracle Creator, and it's a guide to making your own oracle or tarot deck. And nice. I wanted it to be accessible to everybody, you know. So if you do want to make a tarot deck at home, just using pieces of card, or you wanted to make one on your home computer, or you wanted to use Printer Studio, or even if you wanted to get it published, there's a space for everybody to make decks, you know, and for a variety of different purposes as well. Not everybody wants to be published. So sticker sounds great. Like
or they just want to share it with a small group or whatever.
Yeah, you know, even just to use in the privacy of your own home, you know, whatever floats your boat. There, you know, there's a way of doing it. I think, you know, and it doesn't have to be expensive, and you don't have to be able to draw as well. I think that's the other thing that people think is, you know, I need to be a really amazing drawer. That, you know, you can collaborate with people, or you can use stock images, that kind of stuff. You know, there's always a way.
There's always a way, right? Where there's a will, there's a way, as they say.
Definitely, yeah.
So, how many books are you expecting out this couple years now?
How many books?
Yeah. You have the one coming up for creating.
I had this. This is my first book, which is Chariot, Your Personal Guide. And I was asked to write this after Spirit Within was released. It was meant to be a quite a simple guide, but I think anybody that knows me, I just kind of bashed through the word count, and I thought, I'm just going to write the book that I want to write, and I wanted to write the book that I wanted. You know, I'd like to have read when I first started out tarot. So this is that, and then recently that was released in French as well, which was a really nice thing. But I have the Oracle Creator, which is coming out, and that's published by Liminal 11 in November. I think it's November or October, I'm not sure. And then I have another one of these in Focus books, which is on divination. And that it doesn't look at tarot, and it doesn't look at some of the things that it certainly doesn't look at tarot, because I already wrote a book about tarot, but it looks at other forms of divination like Kipper and Lenormand, playing cards, runes, witches' runes, shells. You know, sometimes things that maybe are not, you know, not out there as much as things like palm reading. You know, there is tea leaf reading in there, and you know, I Ching and that kind of thing, or I Ching. So that's coming out as well this year, and then the Anne Stokes one, but I'm not sure when that's coming out. And then there's another one that I might be writing US games for somebody else as well, but I'm kind of holding that off at the moment because I really need to get all this stuff done first. I don't want to be too overloaded. Otherwise, I won't sleep at night.
Too busy juggling.
It's lovely, you know, and I'm so grateful for being given these opportunities, you know, to write these things. I always wanted to write in some way. So, you know, I'm always appreciative for being given the chance to do that. You know,
Thank you, Jamie.
I never complain about having this work.
Jamie just posted the link for the Oracle Creator.
Oh, thank you very much, Jamie. I don't think there is a book like that out there. And, you know, it's another book that I kind of made my own, because when Liminal suggested it to me, they were thinking more about the way that you can create cards in a physical sense. But I wanted it to be more thorough than that. I think when you do create a deck of cards or any kind of divination tool, I think you need to really plan it. So, you know, rather than just kind of taking 50 images and plopping them on cards and there you are. I think it's really good to think about how they're going to work together, you know, and how you're going to get the most out of it. So I spent a lot of time in the book talking about the planning of an Oracle or Tarot deck before you even sit down and do anything, you know. And then I wanted to also look into publishing as well. You know, if you wanted to go into publishing, you know, what do you need to know about that? What do you need to know about self-publishing if that's the route you wanted to take? So it became a much bigger book than I think any of us was expecting to begin with, or that they were expecting. So hopefully it covers a lot of stuff for a lot of people.
Anything in there about like crowdfunding, like Kickstarter or Indiegogo?
Yeah, that's in there too. And there was some things that I didn't know about. And in the book, all the way through, in all the different sections, whether it's about like one section's on photography, if you want to create your deck using photographs. I draw on people like B. Nettles, who created the Mountain Dream Tarot, who I think created the very first photographic tarot. So I lean on a lot of friends in the industry, and they have these kind of set alone pieces in the book where I interview them about the approach they took. So you have artists and collage artists and people that have been down the Kickstarter route. What are the pros of doing that? What are the cons? Because we sometimes see that the great things that happen with a Kickstarter or a self-published deck, but we don't always see what could go wrong. So hopefully it just kind of gives that insight for people. And and as I said, I didn't know, I've never experienced Kickstarter firsthand, so I had to go and find people who had and talk to them.
Right. Sounds like a very thorough book, and I'm looking forward to reading it.
I hope so. I'm sure there's something in there, that I
There's
didn't
always
put in there, but I tried to include as much as I possibly could.
Tyler Sunflower wants to know how many pages in the new book.
In the Oracle Creator, I have to say I do not know offhand, but I can tell you that it has a lot of great illustrations, from all of the deck creators and authors I spoke to. There's examples of their work in there, and there's lots of also like a workbook pieces as well, so that you can consider how you will create your own. So you can print them out or photocopy them rather, and use them in your own creation. But I can't remember offhand.
Jamie looked it up. It's 252 pages.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Thank you, Jamie.
I didn't know that.
It's good to have moderators to look that stuff up for us.
Yeah.
I could do the moderators. In real life. What would I be without you guys?
Thank you.
So what do you have, in your mind as something you would like to do in the future, like either more books or more decks?
Well, the fortune telling deck was something that I had in my mind for a while, because I'd spent a lot of time with Lenormand, but way back I spent a lot of time with playing cards, and I spent a lot of time looking at different methods of using them, and I picked up some really interesting stuff along the way. And a lot of that has been adapted over the years to suit myself, and I wanted to share those things somehow, because as much as it's great to kind of explain to somebody what a card might mean, I find the relationships between cards is even more exciting. So in this book, I want to kind of share some of my own methods and some that have been inspired by other people's methods, about how, as an example, how court cards could be read in a real watertight way, where you're not looking at it and thinking, could it be this? Could it be a person? Could it be part of myself? I'm kind of saying, no, it's this. And this card just fleshes it out even more. So I wanted to write a book like that, and it just kind of made sense to include it with a deck that you could use as well. So that's how the two of those came together. So I'm hoping that it's going to be quite a chunky, informative book. In terms of other things I'd like to do, I've got really caught up with color recently. I've changed. If anybody who is connected to me on Instagram or Facebook will see that I went from this silhouette myself. I used to dress mainly always in black, and I brought color into my life. And color really interests me. So at some point, I would quite like to create something that was connected to or based around color.
Like a color
That
oracle.
at the moment is kind of, you know, way forward.
Yeah, I like the idea of a color oracle though. I
Yeah, there's
appreciate well, and I appreciate also that like the cards are almost color coded in their own way too. So
they are, you know, in Spirit Within, they are definitely for the suits. There are some great color oracles out there already. But you know, I think the thing is with other people's decks, you know, there's so many decks I love by other people, but sometimes it's quite nice to give it your own spin, or you know,
right,
create your own version.
your own version of the color wheel.
Yeah, my own version of the color wheel. Yeah.
And speaking of color, Ika Sunflower says that she loves your red walls.
My red walls. Yeah, which are soon going to change. I've already bought the paint, but thank you. I've had these walls for quite a few years, and so it's a bit of a mess in here because I am planning to redecorate. But it's just kind of like my reading room, and I'm going to go for a brasher, brighter look. So I've been buying accessories and as I say, paint. So that's, but when I finished all the other things, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be down here painting. But you know, I've enjoyed the kind of gothic red colors that are in here. I just needed a change.
This kind of like eggshell yellow was already on the walls, and we just left it because it was nice. So
Yeah, I'm one of those people, and always have been, that likes to change things up every so often.
yeah,
Whether it's, you know, how I look, or what I'm using, or you know, my environment. And yeah, it's about time. I think it's been like this for about 4 years. But I also am guessing that red is probably not the easiest color to paint over, so I'm going to have a bit of a
yeah, it's gonna take a
job
few
on my
coats.
hands. It is.
Did you get any primer?
I have some, yes.
You would start with the primer to get the red covered as much as possible.
Yeah, I think it's going to do a job. I've got all of these wonderful ideas about how I'm going to decorate furniture and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Wow. I'm wondering how long that will last.
Well, I can't wait to see the pictures of the finished product.
Yeah, I will get there eventually, you know.
So next week, I will be interviewing the lovely Sasha Gram about Darkwood Tarot, because there is a sequel coming out, the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. So can't wait to chit chat with Sasha about that. That's exciting.
Sasha is wonderful. She's a lovely lady.
Do you have anything on the interwebs coming up? Any other interviews or classes?
I don't think that I do. This is the thing. Sometimes like at the moment, I'm so involved in, you know, getting the new copy of the Esoterical together. That's kind of like my main job at the moment. And then once I've spent a few days on that, I'll be getting back to finishing the deck and writing more of the book for that. The only things in terms of workshops, I have a workshop with Tony at the UK Tarot Conference in October, which is 2 lunchtime workshops, which is a beginning to the Kipper, which, you know, you can attend in person, but there's also virtual tickets as well. And then next year, I'm going to be traveling to Manchester to speak at the Tarot Association of the British Isles conference as well. But they're the only things I think I have at the moment. I don't like to have too much going on, because I'll just want to go to bed and not get up. So, you know, there are enough for me to concentrate on.
Right. Go with the flow, have a few goals you're aiming at, but otherwise just let life take you where it will.
Absolutely,
We
yeah.
get it. And for anyone who is looking for wearable crystal grids, I do have some skulls. I am going to put together a little video of the pendants I have because they're not all skulls. This is a moss agate that I absolutely adore. Yeah, I think I'll probably put that video up on my Instagram and just going through the skulls and what the different crystals are, why you would want that particular crystal. So. Oh, and lovely Deanne has put up your Instagram as well.
Thank
I
you, Deanne.
believe I put it in the description of the video as well. If I didn't, I will add it. So, thank you, Deanne.
Yeah. At the moment, I'm in between. That's the other job that I'm meant to be doing as well. Is I'm meant to be designing a new website because I closed down my website not too long ago
Mhm.
because I had a bad provider. I just kept getting spam all the time. So
Oh,
I'm in
no.
the process of building a new one in between doing the
Okay.
other things. So the best way, if anybody wants to contact me, is at the moment probably through Instagram
Instagram.
or Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, from Jamie, myself, and everyone here, thank you so much for being here, Stephen. This
Thank
was
you so much, everybody. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
and I will see all of you guys next week.
Bye bye.
Aloha and hui ho. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.